Welcome to Inspirational Leadership. I'm your host, Kristen Harcourt, and we have another fabulous guest. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Paru Radia. Paru is a rare commodity. Most people fall into one camp as either left-brained or right-brained. Paru, however, has always mixed her logical side with her creative side to thrive while navigating challenging environments, whether it be in the corporate world or as a founder and entrepreneur. Becoming a C-suite whisperer and execution ninja was a natural path for Paru, as she has been understanding of the corporate world, having been an employee and a consultant. Known for being a pragmatic optimist and turning entrepreneurial ideas into successful companies, including her own entrepreneurial ventures, Paru launched her company to help executives at various stages and points in their career to accurately assess their mindset, patterns, behaviors, strengths, success criteria, development needs, understand who they really are, articulating what they really want, and creating a specific action plan to achieve their desired results. Her new book, Messes Behind Successes, is targeted to be released at the end of 2024. Welcome to the show, Paru.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you so much.
I'm really interested to hear more about your journey. And so I always like to give guests right from the beginning to talk a little bit more about your story. And a lot of times with guests, when they talk about their story, they'll bring me way back in childhood, or you might bring me later on, anywhere on that trajectory to tell us a little bit more about your story.
Oh, thank you. So very briefly I will start from the beginning. Born and raised in London, England, as part of a conservative Indian family. Went to school, always knew what the expectations of me were in terms of career, behavior, marriage, etc. And I I went to school in London. I went to university in London, started my corporate career at British Airways. Always loved the company from afar. I had very good impressions of British Airways as a place to work, and I won't lie, the lifestyle really appealed. Knowing that I could have easy access to the rest of the world was very appealing. Um, I did my degree in human resources, and um, I always, because of my upbringing, I didn't know who I would marry, where they would be, in which country they would be in. So I intentionally um, chose to get postgrad training in something that was transferable. Like intentionally, I didn't want to be a lawyer or a doctor, not only because I didn't want to anyway, but in my mind, I was thinking, well, if I end up moving country, I'm going to have to requalify, and I don't want to go through all that again. What can I do that's transferable? So I started in procurement, quickly realized that I was at the end of the decision life cycle. And I would sit there thinking, wait, I need to buy this. Who made that decision? Like, where did this decision get made? Um, so I remember asking, well, I mean, people would say to me that, Paru, you can't give your opinion at this point. You just need to, it's been approved by brands and legal and the unions and customer service. If you wanted to have an opinion, you should have joined product or service development. I'm like, well, that's where I'm going to go. Um, so I moved to product and service development. Lots to share about that in terms of change management, etc. Anyway, fast forward, I'm the kind of person I'm the kind of person who's very reflective, and I often think about what am I good at? Where are the skills gaps? What do I need to do about it? I've always had that way of thinking. And who am I and where do I want to be? Every summer, which is when my birthday is, and every Christmas, I would reevaluate my answers to those questions. And that's been something I've done from a young age. Fast forward a few more years, I'd hit a bit of a glass ceiling. And my mentality is I either want to be learning or earning, preferably both. I didn't technically have the opportunity to get a raise at this point just because of the corporate environment and the bands within which you fit. And British Airways have this, I'm sure they still do, had this unsaid philosophy that you don't get promoted on merit. You don't get a raise on merit. You only get a raise when you get a bigger job.
Mm.
But you have lifers at British Airways. So someone has to retire or decease, which is awful, for that position to become available. Um, then anyway, again, fast forward, I had a project at JFK, which meant I was flying into New York every 3 weeks or so. 10 months later, when the project ended, that's when I realized how in love with New York City I was,
Mm.
and how in love with who I was able to be in New York
Ah,
that I was.
yes.
So I had my heart set on New York for a while, but due to the conservative nature of my upbringing and family, New York was always a absolutely not, no way, Jose, cannot, will not, do not, don't even think about it. 3 years later, Kristen, my love affair with New York was still strong. It wasn't a crush. It wasn't a minor, isn't that cute?
Yes.
I was head over heels in love with the idea. And much to the dismay of my family, I decided that I would find a job in New York that was going to be doing something that I'd never done before. That was the whole learning aspect. And I was going to move. And I made that decision on the 28th of February, 2007.
Mm.
Started telling everyone that I came across that I'm moving.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I'd be doing and how
Right.
I'd get there. And I
Yes.
told everyone I was moving, which is fantastic because with that much passion and excitement, I'd 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 developed I'd developed like groups of people that were in on it with me, and they wanted this dream to come true for me. And they connected me to people, they helped me with interviews, they advised me on what it takes to move legally and financially. And 2007, sorry, that was 2007. So July 2nd, 2007, which was only March, April, May, June, that was only 4 months later, I was on a one-way ticket to New York with hand.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so, well, that took 2000. This is sounding like a bit of a monologue. I'm so sorry, listeners.
The listeners really love to get to know people's stories. So they're hearing your story and thinking, where do I want to live and how am I holding myself back from living somewhere?
Oh, thanks. So I'll rest because I can. Stayed at British Airways for another 2 years, realized that for any promotional opportunity, you have to move back to London. Want to do. Was still in love with everything I came here for. And they had mass redundancies. I opted for severance. I had my green card by then. Uh, I do come from a family of entrepreneurs, decided mutually that I would start my own business because I secretly wanted to do that anyway, once I had the corporate experience. My dad and my brother helped me open up a franchise of the UK family business. But I didn't realize I signed up for having a chairman and an investor that would tell me what to do and veto all my decisions. Um, so after 2 years, I'm like, yeah, this isn't for me. Entrepreneurship is, but this business isn't for me. So I gave it back to them. Kristen, it was like doing a live MBA. I made mistakes. It cost a lot of money. Things went wrong. Um, I'm also ultra organized and ultra analytical. So I took notes throughout the journey. I created templates throughout the journey. I created flow charts throughout the journey. And I said to them at the end of 2 years, I've had this other business idea. It's this watch thing. My brother actually noticed it first, and I'm the one that developed the idea. And I said, I'm going to go and do this. Oh my goodness, Kristen, it was a whole lot of don't do it, you're an idiot, it'll never work, go back to corporate, we're not going to fund you, we're not going to support you. Friends thought I was crazy. They're like, no, you're built for corporate, do that. I'm like, and by the way, Kristen, I'm the kind of person that when someone tells me what not to do something, I'm not the kind of person that says, screw it, I'm going to do it because you told me not to, just watch.
Right.
I'm not that person.
Right.
I'm the kind of person that says, tell me why.
Right.
Tell me what?
Yeah.
Tell me what your concern is. Tell me what you think I should do to mitigate that.
Yeah.
Tell me what. And I like digging deep. And then I will go away and think about it.
Right.
And regardless of whether they said do it or not, do what I think is best.
Right.
And what I thought was best was to move ahead with this idea. I knew I could make something of it. I was cut off, very little support from friends, no support from the family. Those were two of the hardest years of my life, quite frankly, on reflection.
Yeah.
Those were the years where I was ordering pizza pies to last 3 days because I couldn't afford salad from the grocery store. It was tough. Um, Fast forward 18 months into the endeavor, my watches were in 400 stores across the US. Fast forward another 6 months, I was bought out by private investors for a decent profit.
Wow.
I had a very wonderful in your face moment with the naysayers, which only lasted about 5 seconds before I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it, can't believe it, can't believe it. To be honest, I was so I was I was still on adrenaline and that drive was still pushing me. So I don't really think I realized until 2 years after selling that what I did, considering the circumstances, was a really big deal.
Right. You're just in it. You're just in it,
Yeah,
taking action. You're not necessarily back over here watching because it's all happening so
correct.
quickly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, and so I was sitting on a little bit of money, enough to not have to get a job straight away, but think about what I wanted to do next. While I was doing that, I was helping lots of friends and friends of friends, consulting for them, not realizing I was consulting for them,
Right.
and helping them with their business ideas and the way they thought and what they were doing and sharing my templates. Again, fast forward a little bit, I'm like, oh, they're making a lot of money based on my advice. I'm
Right.
really happy for them,
Yes.
but maybe this could be a thing.
Get paid for doing this.
Exactly, exactly. So I did some research on how to do that, realized I still had skills missing in order to start my own consulting firm. So I did some fractional work as a COO for a couple of firms.
Hmm.
And then I became an employee of a boutique consulting firm as their full-time COO.
Mm.
While I was doing that, not only was I learning um, what it takes to run a consulting firm, which is what I wanted to, I was growing that company and building a ton of good relationships with corporate clients. I loved that job because it really took my startup side because it was a small firm and melded it with my corporate side, which I loved. I loved the corporate, including the politics because I was always really good at navigating them.
Right. We're going to talk about that
um,
after.
Great. So I'm almost at 2023. So that was I joined them in 20, I think it was 2018. Or 2017 I started. 2017, 2018, did that for a while. And Kristen, while I was there, due to my nature and just how I think and who I am, if I see a problem and I can see a possible solution, I won't keep quiet about it.
Hmm.
Uh, I will say something. And it became very common for me to knock on the door of a senior executive. I'm talking managing partner of a Wall Street law firm. I'm talking COO, CEO of other firms. Knock on the door and say, hello, permission to speak freely. And they'd look at me like, what? And I'll say, I've made some observations that have nothing to do with why you've hired us. I have, however, made some observations and noticed XYZ, and I have a few ideas if you're open to listening to them. And because of the way I phrased it and the way I approached it and acknowledged that, I mean, it doesn't matter whether they take it or not, but I have ideas. Do they want to hear them? It's going to help them out. Um, Never did I get a no. And then I would give them advice, and they would often look at me with, "Who the hell are you? And why are you telling me this?" And I would say I was quite friendlily pushy with it,
Mm,
and they would listen. I was able to influence them, and they would do it. And then that would be followed up with a random phone call or a random knock on my office door saying, "How did you know that would happen?" And
mm,
it turned into a bit of a thing where people started asking for me on
right.
projects,
Yeah.
even though that wasn't my job. I
Yeah.
was there for relationship building, or I was there to run the company. I wasn't there to be on the client site, even though I would do it once in a while. And then when you get 3 to 4 clients keep telling you, "If you did this for a living, I'd pay you,"
Right.
you you kind of think, what could that look like? Um, so I started my business doing executive strategy, which is helping executives think better, be better. And also helping people, consulting, starting your business, growing your business, um, communicating better. And I started that in early 2020, and here we are. I'm doing that. And it's 2023.
Wow, so many observations I have to make around what you shared there. I mean, I love that. I love your self-awareness in terms of you always recognizing, yes, I have these strengths, these are my zone of genius, but this is what I can do to complement that. This is where there might be gaps, and then actually go out there and take action on those ways to be able to close the gaps. I also really appreciated it felt like some self-trust, but it was also mixed in with, I'm going to ask, like, yeah, I'll hear what you have to say. Now I'll take what you have to say. I'll be thoughtful around it. There is perhaps some insight, anyone who's sharing with you around concerns that I will take at face value, but then you explore and take it and then decide and make it your own in terms of the decision around what feels best for you, which I think that takes a lot of courage. And then the other word that's just coming up for me is a self-trust, which I kept hearing that along your journey. Like there was a lot of self-trust going to New York. This is what makes me happy, even though, again, other people might have thought it was the wrong thing. Starting your business and having a lot of people saying that's not possible. How do you think you built that self-trust muscle?
It was a reflex to always being told what to do and how to be and who to be.
Mm,
I've done it because I've been asked this question a few times and I didn't know, so I dug deep. But like I said, I grew up and that's why I actually said at the beginning, I grew up in a conservative household. I've always been told who to be and how to be. And when it pushes you into a corner, because you listen, and I was the good girl, I was obedient. But when it feels so uncomfortable, you question, wait, why does it feel uncomfortable? And me just saying no wasn't working with my family, or me resisting it wasn't working. I had to come up with a better solution that they would also buy into. And
mm,
the only way I would come up with that solution is by digging deep and thinking, who am I? What do I want? Why don't I want that? How do I respond when this happens? How do they respond when that happens? I was so analytical about human behavior, um, which is what actually taught me the skills to help executives because I've been doing the work since I was 4. So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
um, that's where it comes from. And just the evidence over the years that when I've done this, this is when it's gone well. When I haven't, when I've listened to other people, it hasn't gone well. When I've
right.
listened to me, it has.
Yes.
And by the time it came to make the really big decisions, like moving to New York, I had over 30 years of evidence that I
Yes.
make good decisions.
Right. 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 It's like you had being also analytical. It's like you had enough data to support that. Yes, it
Yes.
makes sense that this is the right decision. Love that. I want to circle back to what you said around the company politics because it's a one I hear not with all leaders, but it's a specific type of leader that I work with where I feel like they're very values driven. And with that, they somehow feel like if they're in integrity, then they don't have to deal with politics. And we help to like unwrap and unhook from that story. It's like, no, it's just you're working with a bunch of humans who all have different agendas. And that's not a bad thing. It's just understanding that and recognizing that more. So I heard you saying that you found it something you actually excelled at when it comes to navigating those corporate politics. So for leaders who are listening, who number one might even say, they might identify and say, I struggle with the politics. Like if I had my way, I would just, and actually to take it a step further, where I notice the leaders struggle with those politics more is when they're dealing with a certain kind of personality, which feels like it might be one of the personalities that you said that maybe left you with from the franchise. It's when people are telling you what to do. But some of those perhaps we could describe them as perhaps some old school, old behaviors that might feel a little bit more toxic, where it's more aggressive and being told what to do, and they're having to play in these rooms. And it can be very difficult. How would you suggest they navigate that more effectively?
Um, so I work best in giving advice when I have a very specific scenario in hand. Could you maybe
Yes.
make one up or tell me something
Absolutely.
that
Yes.
you've heard?
Yes. Yes. So it might be one where it could be a very, so it might be a senior leadership team, very male dominated senior leadership team. And this might be a female. And when she's going in there and trying to have conversations and trying to push things through, might be getting a lot of pushback in terms of very aggressive, very reactive, very emotional kind of toxic behavior where there might be shouting and yelling, and that's how they're going about getting to decisions. So not feeling like very conscious leadership, feeling like there's might be some unconscious behaviors happening.
Okay. So my first thing is if you know that you're going to go into a room and there's going to be 10 people shouting at you, I would break this down. I wouldn't go into a room knowing that they're going to be shooting at me. I would build individual relationships with each member of that team. And I would, okay, example, analogy here. You know, when there are forest fires, wildfires, and they're completely out of control,
Yeah.
the way they are managed is when the fire team, we'll call them, burn the remaining fuel, the rest of the forest, so that when the wild bit catches up, there's no fuel left to burn.
Right.
So similarly, if you if this if you were the client, I would advise you to build relationships with these people and whatever it is you want to present in the session, go in advance to understand what their concerns would be, what their pushback would be, what would you need to do in order to get a yes from them.
Mm-hmm.
And once you know all that, you've got buy-in from most of them before you're even in the room. I mean, I watch a bunch of political drama as well. And if you look at that, I mean, that's just coincidence. But you know how people say before a race, like how many votes do we have? And they know the votes before the votes are actually
Right.
officially
Right.
announced in the
Yes.
meeting. It's the same, it's the same methodology. Figure out who's on your side in advance of the public forum. And if they're not on your side, at least get the information or data to understand why so you can mitigate any risks or
Mm-hmm.
you can fix whatever the concern is before you're shot down.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really good advice. And if we're to take it to another level where they might also be saying, well, how do I build stronger interpersonal relationships one on one with some of these individuals? So maybe it's people who are very senior that they don't necessarily, it's hard to get in front of these people. Might be one scenario, or others might just be, well, this kind of personality is a little bit tougher for me. So I feel a bit intimidated around building that relationship. What advice would you give there?
So I'm going to separate those two. One is having access, and one is the personality.
Yes.
I'll speak to the personality first. And what I would say is never make it about you.
Mm-hmm.
Always make it about them.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is their personality? What do they need? What makes them comfortable? What's their objective? What's their agenda? What's going to make them look good? What's going to make them feel good? all of that will get their barriers down. And I mean, we're all in survival mode from caveman times. That hasn't left us. But what that looks like in 2023 is that people want to look good
Yeah.
because people want to keep their jobs,
Yeah.
or they want to be liked, which then gives them a higher chance of keeping their jobs, or they want to be seen to be doing a good job, which inadvertently keeps their job. That's all survival.
Yes.
So making it about the other person and getting to know what's important to them at a business level. Are they trying to save money? Are they trying to get their project done? Are they trying to get more budget approved? Um, Whatever that is on a business level. And then personality wise, take time observing them and analyzing their behavior. When do they respond positively? What happened for that to happen? When do they respond negatively? What happened for that to happen? There is enough data if you take the time to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say make it about them, because then once they do, that actually gives you an open door to say, oh, well, if you need X, Y, and Z, I can help you with that. What I will need in return is A, B, and C. And
Yes.
it gives you that door, but make it about them first. If you go in demanding, I need, I mean, that's enough to annoy anybody.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, absolutely. I share this all the time because it's really that's tapping into empathy, right? Because empathy is trying to understand what's going on in their world. And the more you ask those questions and get curious and come from that place, I like what you're saying as well, because the way you're using the I always say data or data. I go back and forth. My Canadian, I think, is data, US data. Um, but I think what that does is there are a lot of data points that can be being used, but people aren't necessarily recognizing all of those data points. So to be able to go back and look and see, I like what you said there too. Oh, what was an example where you even witnessed in a meeting where things did go really well? And what were other people doing differently in terms of the way they were interacting? I think
Yeah.
that's a really, really important call.
There's something I want to add to that,
Mm-hmm.
with the way I believe humans work and I help my clients with is, so they've got the data points, and so most people will go up to, for example, a senior leader feeling really intimidated or paranoid or nervous. That happens when you think you're being judged.
Yes.
And that happens. And by the way, know that rarely are you being judged, because the other person's also feeling the same way.
Right.
And most of their energy is being put on how they're being judged.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying, if you make it about them, the only thing is, the only way you can feel confident in yourself in order to make it about them is owning who you are. But you can't own who you are until you know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I work with clients, sure, if they've got a fire they need to put out, we'll go straight in. But I will always circle back to some really deep work I do with them and some exercises that I have, which is getting to know who they are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so
Yeah.
you can own it. So if someone asks me to do something I'm not good at, sure, the younger version of me was like, oh my God, they're going to hate me. Oh my God, they're going to judge me. And I'm so awful at that. I now, with joy and big eyes, big smile, be like, oh my God, I'm awful at that. But I am really good at this.
Yeah.
And I will own what I'm really bad at and save us both some time
Yes.
and both some anxiety.
Yes.
So, I don't mean that in the British sense of let's be really humble and say, oh, no, 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 it's not a big deal. It's not. It's about really knowing yourself to a point that you can say, oh, I am really good at that. I'll take that for you. Or I'm not so good at that. Can we look at someone else to do it? Or can I
Yeah.
have help?
I mean, we talk a lot about this on the show, and multiple layers with what you just shared there, because one layer is really looking at understanding your gifts and your talents and what you do really well. And I talk even sometimes around the zone of genius, and then the zone of excellence, and then zone of competence and zone of incompetence, right? And how often people even stay in zone of excellence, but they don't really love that stuff, but they're good at it. And people keep giving it to them, but they don't even really enjoy it. So I think that's so important in terms of understanding who they are. But I think, and it sounds like you do this too, and I do this with my clients as well, which is taking it another layer, which is actually asking that question, like, who am I? Like really like
Yeah.
understanding in terms of idiosyncrasies and what brings me joy and all of that kind of stuff, those deeper questions that my experience for a lot of the leaders that I work with, it's the first time that they really spent a lot of introspection, asking themselves these questions and even defining what's their definition of success, what actually is aligned for their purpose and their impact, and all of these different questions. They haven't really asked themselves. They've just kind of had this conditioning or following along what they think they should do or what they've been told should matter and what they're told they're supposed to be. But then when they actually
Yeah.
get slow it down and ask those deeper questions, they recognize, oh, like there sometimes we uncover so many beliefs that we're unconscious that are operating in the background that have been handed down to them that they don't even believe those things anymore, but they're still operating as if they do.
Exactly that. And I like breaking those, excuse me, I like breaking those down. I like I like holding up that mirror, and then I like opening the curtains and showing them what's out the window, and
Yes.
opening the door and showing them
Yes.
what's in that direction, and then showing them a map and saying, well, if you want what's out there, you can do this. And if you want what's out that window, you can do that. Or you can stay where you are. But if you stay, I want it to be a conscious choice. I want you to want to do what you're doing.
Yes. Yes, yes, exactly. There's something that you spoke about that I was very intrigued about, which is talking about to be the leader you want to be, that it's not just about why your why matters, but it's also until you know your who. So tell me more about
Yeah.
that, because I'm used to, we hear, the Simon Sinek's of the world talking about what's your why,
Yes.
but I love what you were talking about, and I'm very curious. Tell me more about the who.
I believe that you won't know your why until you know who you are deep down inside. You will try on, it's like trying on a bunch of different clothes. And you're like, oh, I think this looks good. I think this looks good. But there'll always, in my opinion, there'll always be something that doesn't fit just right. It's a little tight under the armpit, or it's a little snug at the waist,
Yes.
but it looks good enough.
Yeah.
And people are impatient. Today's world, instant, gratification. As soon
Yeah.
as you think you found your why, you go with it. But you know what it's like, Kristen, when you veer off by 1 degree, it might not seem so much, but further down the line, you're so far away from where you were intending on being because your navigation was off by 1 degree. I truly believe in being in sync with who you are so deep inside. What experiences have you had? What motivates you? What triggers you? Don't settle for what you think your why is. Know who you are and what made you who you are. And that will guide you to what your why is. And it will keep you grounded. It will keep you focused. It will stop you veering off by that 1 degree
Mm,
that other people might tempt you towards and say,
mm,
oh, well, this is your why. This is similar to your why. Come do this.
nice.
At least if
Yeah.
you know who you are deep down, that's your North Star. That's your, you know, that's going to drive me crazy. This is how I behave, or this is how I operate, or this is how I feel when something's not aligned. You have to be so aligned for your why to mean anything.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really important distinction that you share there. And I think sometimes that step does get missed. And
Yeah.
it can explain a lot. So your book that is going to be out at the
Yeah.
end of 2024, Messes Behind
Yes.
Successes. Tell me a little bit more around the impetus for doing this book and what are some of the key themes that you talk about?
So when I was looking at starting my business, I hired a coach. And he gave me a bunch of books to read about the business world to sort of reinvigorate thoughts around how people are and what they do, etc., etc. Kristen, I was so bored when I read most of these books. Most of these books are written by people who are uber successful, but they were born into success, or their dad met someone on a golf course and then they were introduced to, this kid who, well, they weren't really a kid, they may be in their 20s or early 30s, who then got funding, relatively easily. And then they write this book about, oh, yeah, life was really tough. Look at me now, I'm rich and famous. And that used to drive me crazy.
Yes.
It's, well, I'm happy for you. I'm not one of these people who gets unhappy when other people are successful. I'm like, yay, how do we all get there?
Yeah.
Like, show us how, tell us
Yes.
how. And then when I read their books, there was no how. It
Right.
was always, yay, look at me now, and really vague thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to put something together which had a lot of how. How do you navigate a difficult conversation? How do you think about what's really important? How do you analyze X, Y, and Z? Why is that important? And there are so many successful people out there. And I don't mean the rich and famous ones, I mean the regular, really successful
Yes.
people
Yes.
who, on paper, by the majority of the world, are deemed successful. I mean, they just up and they didn't. That's not realistic. They had they had issues, they had challenges, and they learned how to navigate them. That's to know about. That's what I want everyone else to know about. One, so they don't feel alone, as in the readers don't feel alone.
Yes.
Two, it normalizes messaging because it's all about being real. And it gives them, hopefully, tangible things to say and do to be successful. So I've interviewed so senior leaders talking about where they are today, but that's literally just an introduction. Really talking are moments where they were screamed at in a board meeting, or when they got fired, or when they had a toxic boss, didn't how. And those are the things these people need help. Not the, I mean, sure, the inspirational books,
Yeah.
but I think most need more of a how-to guide
Yeah.
than just the inspiration.
Yes, 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 absolutely. That's the juicy stuff, right? So often when I'm having a CHRO or CEO on the show, I will ask them like, tell me about those difficult conversations, tell me about those difficult moments, those learning, the failures. And they all say like that's where I learned so much about myself, so much about what I would and wouldn't tolerate, so much humility, all of these different all these different qualities. But I think you're absolutely right. It's that you want to be able to have the tangible. How can I take what you're saying and be able to practice and play with that? Which is one of the things I love so much about coaching, because we'll talk about something and then they'll go and execute it and then it'll feel scary, uncomfortable, and sometimes some things work and some don't, but then they can come back and say, oh my gosh, this worked really well, or this didn't. Oh, I think there might be some technical issues for a second. I can you hear me okay? I think we're having a technical issue for 1 second. So Paru was trying to talk and all of a sudden her volume went. So she is going to come back in 1 second and hopefully be able to talk a little bit more about what we were just saying. Here she comes. Let's have a look. The beauty of technology. And I think she is coming back online, and let's see how the volume is. Can you hear
I'm
me?
back. I hear you
You
now.
are
I'm so
back.
sorry. It just cut
It's
out.
the wonderful intricacies of technology. Sometimes it really is working well and sometimes not, but we were back here. So we were just in the moment talking about do you remember exactly
The
where we
juicy
are?
stuff. Yes, the
Yes,
HR
yes,
folks and the juicy stuff.
yes, the juicy stuff, right? Because I think sometimes, even where I've been on panels, and the CHROs are like getting into like, I think part of it is, yes, we want to hear about the tactical and what you're doing with your organization, but we also want to hear the human part. Like, tell us what it was like to be in your world. Tell us how you got to where you are. Tell us some of the very difficult conversations you had to get through. And I think sometimes that gets sugar coated and just like, but here is where I am now. And we don't hear about that
Yeah,
stuff on the journey, which is really, really important.
yeah, I agree.
So this conversation has been so fun. I feel like we could go into so many. I would want to go into all the different themes and topics in your book, but we're going to give people an opportunity to do that when the book does come out next year. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to them a little bit more around how they can even get on the pre-sale list. But I always like to give my guests an opportunity to leave our audience with a final thought, whatever is showing up for you in this moment as a final thought.
My final thought is please, please, please do whatever it takes to spend some time alone and get to know yourself on a deep level. Not who you think you are, not who you once were, not where you want to be, but who you are today and how and why, and then what you can do with that. But take time. Take time to get to know yourself.
I think it's such a really, really important use of your time, and really, from my perspective, can be quite transformational. And I can't tell you how many times that my goal has been to just help leaders carve out that time and make that something, that gift that they can give to themselves. It
Yeah.
can be huge. I think that's wonderful wisdom. Okay, so Paru, where can people learn more about you?
Thanks, Kristen. My website, paruradia.com. So it's literally my first name, last name.com. On it, you will see other podcasts I've participated in. You'll see webinars that I've delivered, and there's also a page for you to sign up for the list for when my book is published or the pre-sale is launched. You will be the first to hear about it. It's all on there, paruradia.com.
Amazing. And I'll make sure to include all of that in the show notes. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for being here today.
Thanks, Kristen. I really appreciate the airtime. Thanks for listening to me in my monologue.
You shared tons and tons of wisdom. I know that everyone's going to get a lot out of it. And as always, wherever you are in the world, I'm saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, sending tons of love. Bye-bye.